Hey everybody, how we doing? You know who this is, man. It's Paul Carassone, also known as the Property Boss. I hate saying that, by the way, but yeah. So you know what? This is the first of what is going to be many long-form YouTube videos. I'm definitely taking the ride down YouTube. All right. So you know what? What we're going to talk about today is setting up your property right. All right. And when I say setting up your property right, how do you buy a piece of property? What is it that you're looking for? How do you know if you're paying the right price? You got to realize something. You go look at a property. The first thing I look at is the price. Obviously, I'm going to look at the property. Then I look at the price. I want to see, number one, if it's in a market I'm interested in. Then I look at the numbers. And then I look at the fantasy numbers that the seller is going to be putting down to get as much for his property as possible. You know what? You can't blame the guy or the girl. They want their money. They want money for their property. Now, what happens? The difference is the experienced buyer versus the buyer who's in trouble, the buyer who's in a 1031, or the inexperienced buyer. You know, there's so many different buyers that would force somebody to overpay for a piece of real estate. This guy here will never overpay for a piece of real estate. Never. It's never going to happen. It never has, and it never will. Here's a piece of property I'm looking at right now. Okay, it's in a beautiful area. It's in a market that my brother and I were in 20 years ago, and we got out. Okay, and now, you know what? Circumstances are dictating that we may wind up there again, just in a different quality of product. Okay, this is a high-rise building. It's in Upper Manhattan. When I say Upper Manhattan, in the 60s. You know what? And we're talking about an A-class building in the $70 million range, which I got to tell you, man, you know what? When I was 18, I bought a piece of real estate because I knew I wanted to be in real estate. I knew that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Now, it was a long journey to get there, by the way. And then I bought my first piece for $14,000. You know what? Thinking about it, you know, saying, okay, I can do it, and I bought it, and whoop-dee, I got my first piece of property. But that was about all I had enough money to buy, $14,000. So now what happens? I'm living in that property. I had an apartment that we could rent out, so we rented out an apartment. The house was a moneymaker. It was a moneymaker for sure. I was making $400 a week. $400 a week in my 9 to 5, and that wasn't a 9 to 5 either. It was a 6 a.m. to sometimes 8 p.m., 9 p.m. job. All right, that's what I call work. Now, here I am, getting my house, thinking I'm going to go. I knew one day I was going to be in real estate, blah, blah, blah. So here we go. I buy it, I keep it. I did, in fact, let's call it 20 years later, get into real estate as my full-time job. All right, that was it. That was my support system. That's all that was keeping me alive, and I was living a good life. All right, so now I sold that building, 14, remember that number, 14,000, because I sold it for 1.6. You're talking about some scadols right there. Now, here I am looking at, remember, from 14 to 1.6, here I am now looking at $70 million buildings. And it's not like I'm only going to buy one. I'm going to buy more than a few because I have to, because I'm changing the portfolio. I'm changing the look, the sound, the overall energy of my portfolio. My brother and I are changing it. So now, looking at this property here, $70 million. Never in my wildest dreams did I believe I'd be buying a piece of property like this. I swear to God, I never thought that I would be at this level. But I'm here. It's crazy. I am here. So you know what? When I'm buying a piece of property, the first thing I'm looking at is the setup. I'm searching online. I've got people calling me up, telling me about properties. The first thing I tell them is send me the setup. Setup, again, is the offering memorandum that is put together by the seller. Now, I'm looking through the setup. And I don't even have to see the property to know everything I need to know about the property just by looking at that setup. Okay? Because it's going to tell me everything I need to know. It's going to tell me cap rates. Everybody thinks cap rate is going to be what the property makes. Me, it just tells me how much risk is in that property. How much risk am I willing to accept? Remember this, the higher the cap rate, the higher the risk. You may make a few more dollars on it, but it's going to be far more risky. The lower the cap rate, the higher the price of the property, and you're going to be making less money on that property, but it's going to have far less risk. You guys got to know that. But then I run it through my calculator. I take their setup, I run it through my calculator, because the second thing I look for in that setup are the lies. And they're in there. They're in there everywhere. And I know who's lying, what's lying, and where the truth is. And I'm able to pull them apart. Why? Because of experience. Setup is also going to tell me how well the property is being managed. Okay, is it being managed to the fullest potential? What type of tenancy it has in there? And then along with that setup, the next question is, what are the arrears? How much do tenants actually owe? Tenants that are not paying rent. I want to know that. That's super important that you know that, because is it going to be a fight to collect your money, or is it going to be a pleasure to collect your money? That may not be embedded in the setup, but I can tell you this, by looking at the cap rate, I can tell you whether a property has arrears or not. Guaranteed, I can tell you. But my setup is very, very structural. There are numbers in there that most real estate investors would never even look for. Okay, but I look for them because it is a measure of how much money I'm going to be making from a piece of real estate. This property here, $70 million. It's 103 units. I ran the numbers. You know what? Let's go over these numbers real quick, all right? I look at these numbers, I have to laugh sometimes, because this is how I'm running this property. This is the bones, the gravy, all right? This is what makes this property work or not work. Right off the bat, let's look at it. $70 million price. Now, my down payment on that, 25%. I only run properties based off of a 25% down payment. And I'll tell you why later. But $17,500,000 is going to be the down payment on this property. That means my leverage amount is going to be $52,500,000. You ready for this? Because your balls are going to burn on this one. At the 7% interest rate, you should be running all your properties at 7% interest rates. Why? Because as you guys now know, interest rates go up, interest rates go down. They don't stay steady and they don't stay down forever. 20-year average is anywhere between 7 and 8%. Nobody tells you that shit. I do, that's who. At a 7% interest rate, your monthly mortgage payment is $349,283.81. Man, I feel that right here. The yearly mortgage payment on that property is $4,191,405.72. Pay attention. Gross rent roll on this property is $4,387,620. Now, wait a second. Because when you ask the agent or the broker, he's going to tell you, no, there's upside here. There's the upside. Okay? There's the upside. There's no guarantee you're going to get upside, because you don't know what that city, what that area is going to turn into 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years down the road. Okay? But you will still be paying that mortgage at that point. Right now, this property, just look in there. Just look in there. The property's a dog. Okay? This property is a pig. It's a pig, it's a dog, it's any animal you don't like, that's what it's going to be. And I love dogs. But the vacancy rate, because all properties have vacancy rate, is going to be hitting you with a $219,000 number at 5%. That means the gross rent roll with vacancy is going to be $4,168,000. Man, I got to tell you, that'll make you choke. Your expenses on this property is $978,000 a year. That's $81,500 a month. Your GRM, and for those of you who don't know, GRM stands for Gross Rent Multiplier. And that is the only way I buy real estate, because I know what the GRM for every area is. And you know what? Here's something else you guys got to know. When you see a low cap rate, you are definitely going to see a high GRM. Those two run together, all right? And it all comes down to price, all right? Low cap rate equals high GRM equals high price. Also equals less risk. With this one, this is all risk. So now your net income before mortgage is $3,409,620. Let's throw a mortgage payment in there. Once you add that, your net income monthly with the mortgage is going to be minus $65,148. And now, hearing that, there's somebody out there who would still entertain buying this. Next is going to be your net income yearly with mortgage. This property is upside down by $781,000 a year. It is a minus 4% cash on cash return. Okay? Think about that shit. Now let's throw some gravy in there that most people don't look at. All right? When you have a mortgage on a piece of property, you pay interest and you pay principal. People never think about principal being their money. I do, because that principal is going into the bank. It's my money. It's just knowing how to extract it later, which I do, okay? But here you go. Annualized principal reduction on this property is $533,000. Think about that. Think about that. $533,000 that in 5 years, which typically most mortgages on these properties are, 500 is going to be $2.5 million in 5 years that you're going to have liquid in that property. But the bank is holding that money, and you need to know how to get it from the bank. That's it. It comes to you in the form of a refi. And so that was, before that, was -4 cash on cash. Now with that annual principal reduction, you're talking about -1. Does it make it better? Yes. Would I buy it? No. Because I would never buy a property that is a loser, number one. I would never buy a piece of real estate that I could get more money from the bank in interest on a regular basis, on a regular deposit, than I would from owning and running that piece of property. It would never happen. Now, this property, with all those beautiful numbers I just told you about, is negative $248,000 net. $248,000. You know what that is? That's your kid's future. That's your retirement right there. That's whether you retire broke or retire happy. And I can tell you this, if you buy this pig, you're retiring broke each and every day. You don't want to work your whole life to wake up broke. That is not the way you do it, man. You're supposed to work your whole life and rest, relax, and be economically successful, okay, when you retire. Because you don't want to have to worry about you don't want to worry about where you get your next dollar from, whether you have to have a job after you retire. That is not in my wheelhouse. No way.